This story starts with a 19-year-old kid named Barney Robinson. Barney actually grew up right down the street here from Menlo College in Redwood City, California. You see, the thing is, Barney was pals with my grandfather, and they served together during World War II. Now, my grandpa was named after him, but being Greek, I called him Papu. And that's Papu George up there, and his pal Barney right behind him. Like many of you, World War II is taught to us in school. We see it in movies. It comes up every once in a while and just kind of feels something that doesn't seem real sometimes. But it became very real because growing up with my grandfather and being a grandkid, we all find ourselves being spoiled by our grandparents. And they spend time on us. And if I have one regret in life, it's that I wish I would have asked more about them. So when he passed away right before I graduated from college, I found myself thinking about that and having some regret. And what my grandfather did, he left me a box of stuff. So when I graduated, I had a little present for me. And inside that box was a bunch of mementos from the past. Stuff that told a story that I didn't really think too much to ask about. It had his journals, photographs, and a history that preceded me. And what I came to discover was that out slipped a newspaper article. And this article made me teleport right back to my very first memory that I had almost forgotten about. I was 5 years old, and the image flooded back. I know my grandfather wanted me to meet somebody special, and he was very nervous, and he was holding a dozen roses. And we got to the door. He knocked. It opened. And out came this 80-year-old woman who I still vividly remember because her eyes were white. She was blind. And Papu said, "From here on out, I'm going to give these roses to you in person." All I remember is her reaching out and touching his face, saying something like, "My boy is home." That memory just went in the back. And not having my grandfather around and finding this article, I actually started to discover the real story. And I started to learn why maybe someone from World War II didn't share what the war was like. Turns out, for 40 years, my grandfather had brought roses to this woman anonymously. When Papu George and Barney Robinson were stationed at Guadalcanal, which is in the Solomon Islands, they were with a group called Air Group 11. Just one group out of all the forces to free people. And they were there to liberate people that they never met. They had gone through battle, and their commanding officer at the time wanted to give them a break for morale. They were suffering from shell shock, now called possibly PTSD. And so he had a transport plane land on the island and was going to give these boys 2 weeks because they had a long ways to go with no end in sight. So all these guys ran up to the plane, and my Papu and Barney were the last two to board, and there was only one spot left. They decided to flip for it. So they flipped a coin toss, and Papu lost. So his buddy, Barney Robinson, got to go. And they were thrilled because they were going to go to Australia for 2 weeks. The plane took off, crashed. Everyone died. I would come to learn that my grandfather would suffer from survivor's guilt. Out of all the battles they fought, the one flight that he didn't get on was the one that went down. And survivor's guilt is very simply the guilt of surviving. So, his mother, who was a widow, had no other children, lost her only son. There's a term for this that no one wishes to have on them, and that is called a Gold Star family member. It's a title earned when you lose someone in your family in the act of service. So Papu would give these roses to her anonymously, and this poor old lady never knew who it was. But on the 40th year, he heard that her health was failing, so he brought him to her in person. I would find myself having a sense of, I knew what I wanted to do a little bit now after I graduated, and I wanted to help serve those that served and continue that tradition. I could never find where Barney Robinson's mother was buried, but I did find that he was buried at Golden Gate National Cemetery near San Francisco. So every year for Memorial Day, I bring him flowers. For a 19-year-old, I would never know. But his life and his sacrifice would live with me for the family that he never had. Now, like many of you who are graduating college or just recently graduated, there's a barrier. The barrier is this: what's next? It's not really a question that you want to hear as a college graduate, but it's the one question everyone older than you always asks you. It's really annoying. And who has the answer? I certainly didn't. So I found myself escaping that answer, and I went back to the past. So I opened up that journal and kind of realized, hey, I can hang out here for a little bit. And my family leaves me alone because it's like an oral history project, right? So I'm learning these stories, and I came to discover that there was lots of people that fought and sacrificed during World War II. And I asked the question in my head, gosh, it would be great if I could have asked Papu. Why didn't I? Then I broke through the barrier and answered this question: what if I could find the men he served with? So I pulled out all those journals, laid them all out. I used the, whatever I learned in college, which you definitely learn how to research and write papers, right? So I'm digging through, and I had a roster. I went online, I found phone numbers. Now, this generation, which is candidly called the greatest generation, they're great because it's possibly the last generation that picks up the phone. And they probably shouldn't, but I'm glad that they did. I must have called nearly 1,000 phone numbers, and I managed to get a handful of guys that picked up the phone. And I just asked them this: do you remember Rattle-Ass? That was the nickname for Ratellus. I had their attention, and I said, would you tell me what I didn't ask my grandfather? What was it like? They were more than delighted. They probably didn't think anyone was ever going to ask them as they were approaching 100. So I got their information, and I decided, let's go on a road trip. So I got a couple friends, and we plotted out the map, picked a couple spots around the country, and I have to warn you, none of these guys live in places where you want to visit. So the excitement there was a little, but we managed to do it. And we traveled across the United States, and I found 11 veterans that flew in Air Group 11. Mind you, I didn't know what to do with this. I was just very excited to do it. It was a second chance to hang out with my grandfather. I heard all their stories, and what I quickly realized was that it wasn't just a 100-year-old who was talking to me. It was the spirit of a 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old that came out. And then it made me see how all of us, as we go through life, still have that spirit within us, no matter how old we become. Now, I put this all together, and what I quickly realized was I heard the word deadline when you're in college, right? It's something you ask your professor when you can wait at the last second to turn something in. But this time, I heard from a 100-year-old, hey, I'd like to see this interview. Can you hurry up? That word jolted in me, and I focused, and with my friends, we put together an oral history documentary. Never done something more fast in my life. And I wanted to show it to them. Now, these guys aren't really internet savvy, so it was like, oh, send me the link. That's not going to fly. But I did discover that these men flew off the USS Hornet, which is still in existence today. It's in the San Francisco Bay Area. And what I did was, I got all these guys together. You can see I grew up a little bit since then. And this was the greatest adventure I could ever ask anyone to do. I said, would you like to come back to the Hornet and I'll show it to you? Kind of dangled it to them, you know? And of course, the family's like, well, that's a lot, but they insisted. This was going to be their last flight, and they wanted to make it back to a ship that they hadn't flew off of since World War II. We all came together and watched their stories interweave to tell the story of Air Group 11 in the hangar bay of their old ship. The feeling of having them watch it, and I was watching them watch it. I wasn't even looking at them. I was just enthralled of watching their eyes just get wet and the smile of knowing that they weren't going to be forgotten. But more importantly, the stories that we captured wasn't about them. They wanted to tell the stories about their friends that weren't around anymore. So it was stories from the past that they were speaking about, their old friends. We all got together and had an awesome night. And shortly after this, they all flew west. And here I was holding their stories for a documentary. I was so excited to then just give it away and put it online and just let people find it. And what I ended up doing unknowingly is the barrier of the past smashed through, and I metaphorically kicked the hornet's nest, if you say. And what happened was, all those Gold Star families that they heard stories of family members that they never knew, but someone who served with them did, got to them. And all these clues and all these it was like a repository of 8 decades worth of pain, but enthusiasm to remember their great uncle or their father or their grandfather. And what happened was, we got a clue from that commanding officer later in the war would be shot down and crash on a shore in Taiwan. Now, what happened is, sometimes it's hard to identify someone over a battle. And when World War II ended, the U.S. went through the battlefields of the Pacific and recovered the remains of all the servicemen that were killed and any clues that were left there. And they were repatriated and brought back 5,000 miles to Hawaii at a cemetery called the Punch Bowl. And if you ever go there, it's very solemn because you just see row upon row that says unknown. And there's a little number at the right-hand side that references a case file with those details that they had at the time. Based on all this and all the information I got from these stories and people watching it online, we were able to put together and had enough clues for at least us to believe that one of those unknowns was their commanding officer. So now we had another challenge. Find the descendant of Frederick Schrader, their commanding officer. It's the only time I could say that going online for social media was healthy. But I was, help me, help me, help me. And then people were coming online to help me find who his descendant could have been. When Frederick Schrader was killed, he left behind a wife and 2 little girls. The theory that I posited was that maybe Schrader's wife remarried, and then the last name went to history. If you can imagine being a widow in 1944 with 2 little girls. So, we had enough clues and found his 2-year-old daughter at the time. Now this girl, before she said goodbye to her father for the last time, her dad gave her a teddy bear. And this teddy bear would be the only thing that she would have of her father for nearly 80 years. We took all this information and we asked her if she could take a cotton swab for a DNA sample, and we put it together, and there's a fantastic organization called DPAA. It's one of the most unique things in our government. It's called the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, and their sole job is to find those who never came back. We sent all this information in, and I can tell you, he came back. Thinking about that first memory when I was 5 of a headstone of a boy I never knew or would ever meet, and how an 80-year-old woman, when I was 5, with her blind eyes, and then coming out of this now, and there's another 80-year-old woman who would be the daughter of their commanding officer. I don't have any words, but all I can tell you is when you're thinking about what to do, I found that if you do something for others, it all comes back and makes you feel pretty darn good. So, I can't tell you, I felt when watching bring her little teddy bear there and receive the flag that would drape her father's casket. For a lot of you in college right now, and you're wondering what to do, I have a little trick, okay? Next time you go to a party with a family and they're all asking you what's next, ask them about their past first. What was it like when you were my age? Just get them talking about them. That'll give you enough room to exit. And remember, the next time you think about moving forward, don't worry. Look back. Look back before you leap. Thank you.